And welcome to our NetSuite debtor management presentation. I'm just going to share my screen now and just run through a quick slideshow. So I'm Sinead Hayes, I'm the marketing manager here in OSSM, and I'm joined by my colleague Brian Doherty, who is one of our senior solution consultants. So we decided to put this presentation together because we thought it was an interesting topic, looking at ways in which you can use NetSuite to do more, to automate more, and to help you basically manage your debtors better, to get paid faster. That's the whole objective. So we're going to look at some of the standard functionality, and we're also going to look at some of the optional modules or optional tools that are available as well. The agenda is as follows. We're going to look at the customer record. Brian's going to talk us through some of the settings on the customer record that impact on AOR. We're going to look at a couple of different options for producing statements, and we're going to take a closer look at how to use safe searches to automate your chasing. I'll then talk a little bit about workflows, and following on from that, then we'll take a quick look at the Dunning Cloud Service module, which is an optional module that's specifically designed to help businesses to automate their chasing. And finally, then we'll take a look at an example of an AOR dashboard with some of the KPIs and reports and KPIs and reports and graphs on that particular dashboard. And then we'll wrap up. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Brian, and he's going to talk us through some of the presentation.
Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen, and we will just jump straight into the options on the customer record itself. So if we're taking a look at the customer record and we go to the financial tab, the first field that we will look at is the terms field. So the terms field is the standard account terms that you have for this customer, and it effectively calculates the due date that is going to appear on transactions. So 30 days from document date or 30 days net. There is a standard list of terms that come as standard with NetSuite, but you can add additional terms to this list by going to Setup, Accounting lists, and we go to look in the filters and we go to term, and we can add new terms to this list. I go back to the customer account that I'm dealing with, and again within financials tab, the next fields we'll look at are the credit limit fields. So this is effectively the credit limit that the customer is allowed to have with you as a company. So in this case here, we're looking that the customer can have a balance up to €1,000. That field goes hand in hand with the hold field. So we can say that if the customer goes over €1,000, that they will, in this case, automatically go and hold. And the options within this are hold, on, or off. So if we say that it's going to go automatically, then it'll use the credit limit, or we can go in and manually change the hold field to on or off on demand. And there are some parameters in the background that help us use the credit limits. So if I go to Setup, Accounting, and I go to the accounting preferences, and we look at the accounts receivable functions, we've got customer credit limit handling, and this can be set to ignore, warn only, or enforce holds. So what that is if you put on a transaction and that takes you over your credit limit, then you can have it that it's only going to warn you. It will automatically enforce the holds. The additional piece of information here is if you want to include orders as a calculation for your credit limit. So if you had a credit limit of €1,000, the customer has a balance of €800, and you input an order for €250. If we tick this box, then that order would take you over your credit limit, and then you would the credit limit handling would come into force. Another parameter that we have is days overdue for warning hold. So this is effectively the grace period that you have before the system will start calculating the hold. So if we put in 10 days, this would allow you to go 10 days overdue before it implements your credit limit handling. So that's just a little bit about credit limits. If I go back to the customer account, we also have some other fields within the financials tab that is useful for debtors management. We've got the balance information. So this is the balance that's in the account, the value of the balance that is overdue currently, how long the account is overdue, what the value is of unbilled orders, and we've also got an aging of your debt available here also. We've also got the communication tab, and this is for recording information in relation to the customer. And this can be used for debtors management also. So when we go in here, we can go in and we can set up a new task. So this could be a task to call a customer, or a reminder for you to send a communication to the customer. And when we set up these new tasks, the tasks will appear within the calendar, the user's calendar. So if I go back out onto my home page and I look at my calendar, the events or the calls that you have logged here will appear on this calendar as a reminder. And you also can set those calls up to appear in your reminders list. So when you go to tasks to complete on your reminders list, it'll pull up a list of the tasks that the user has to complete. And this could be reminders to call or chase overdue accounts. You also can keep additional messages, so emails. So if you do an email from within the account, it'll hold reference to that email here. And you can also attach files. So maybe it's a debtor's letter or any other sort of communication in relation to this customer. So the idea is that NetSuite is held or kept as a single source of information in relation to this customer, so that any user can come in and look at this information. So it's not held in different sources in Excel spreadsheets or yellow post-it notes stuck to the person's PC. The next thing we'll look at is generating statements, and there's multiple ways of generating statements within NetSuite. I suppose the easiest way to generate a statement is to go from within the customer's account, is to go to Actions, go to Generate Statement, and it'll bring up the customer's details here. We can see the balance. We can input the statement dates of that is the date as at you want to generate the statement. The start date is the first date of the first transaction that you want to put in. So I could put it, or to show, I can go 01/01/2019. So it'll show all transactions from that date. Any transactions that are prior to that date that are still outstanding will be shown as a balance forward. We also can choose to show only open transactions. And if you have multiple forms that you use to send statements, then you can choose the form that you want to choose. And then we can either email or print. Now that sends an email. If you choose to email, that sends an email to the customer, but it's quite a flat email and there's not a lot of information on it. Probably a better way of sending your statements from within the account is to go to the Communications tab again, go to Messages, go to Email, and again it picks up the information, the customer's account. It'll pick up the main email address on that customer. You can add here additional email addresses that you want to include on this message. If we go to message, we can type out a message here. So you could type out an individual message, but probably more convenient is to choose a template or to create a template in the background that you use for sending statements. So you can have multiple statement templates and you can choose the relevant statement template to send. The advantage of creating a template is that it will complete the message for you, and it will also put in subject lines. And then we can go to attachments, and we can choose at this point that we want to include the statement, and we can put in the statement date and the start date. And when we merge and send this statement, it will send the statement off to the customer, but it will also attach a communication to the account, so we can see, have a record of when we sent the statement, and we also have the attachment that would have went with that statement email. The next way of sending or of generating statements is this would be more if you're generating a batch of statements to multiple customers. We can go to transactions, customers, and generate statements. And we can add our statement start date again, and the statement date and the start date. We can do it for particular groups. But what we also can do, which is nice, is we can customize the screen that we're looking at. If I go to customize, I can choose to add additional filter or columns or filters to the list view. So if I go additional columns, I can choose that I want to introduce a column for the email address, and I can say that I want to add a filter. I want to filter my list maybe by sales rep. When I save my choices, when I go in here, I can choose a particular sales rep, and you can see that it filters the information here. And we've got the additional field for the email address. We can choose to pick a number of different customers, or if I pick on this little selection box, it chooses everybody. And then I can choose to print from here or to email my statements from here. Another way to do this is by employing workflow. And workflow is a method within NetSuite for automating sending of documentation, but it also can be used for many different functions within NetSuite for changing the behavior of forms or for automating certain processes within the system. We'll use workflow today to look at automating the sending of statements. So this scenario, I'm going to choose workflow to automate the sending of statements to just the customers within my Irish subsidiary. And to do that, I'm going to use Save Search, and we'll refer to Save Searches throughout this presentation. But Save Searches allow us to filter information or add criteria to existing list views to create a Save Search for a particular set of results. So in this case, I'm going to use a Save Search that I created called Statements. Statements for the Irish subsidiary. So if we take a look at the results of this Save Search, we can see that we're just picking up all the customers here that are within the Irish subsidiary. And all I did to create this Save Search was to take the existing financials list that is within the system, and I edited that Save Search, and I introduced a criteria just to say that I only wanted to look at customers with a primary subsidiary of Ireland. So if I go back now to NetSuite and I go to customization, and I go to workflows, and I've set up one called Statements Ireland. And if I go into that and we take a little look at how I created this save search. If I go to edit the workflow, what I'm doing is I'm using the customer record, and I'm using my save search to extract from the customer record the accounts that I want to work with, in this case, the accounts within the Irish entity. I'm going to do this schedule on, or do this workflow on a schedule, and it's going to repeat weekly on every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and it's going to start on the 22nd of the 6th. If I go to the state, this sort of defines what exactly is going to happen. If I go in and we have a look at that, as I said, I'm going to use that save search. When I send the statements are going to be sent from this user. And I'm going to source the email field for each customer from the customer record, from the main email field on the customer record. Now, if you wanted to, you could create additional email fields by customizing the record, and you could choose those custom email fields. So you might have a custom emails field specifically for the statement email address. Within the workflow, I can define a custom email template, and I can put in my details in here for that I want to appear on the email. Within workflow, you can choose to use HTML statements as well, the source fields, and you can introduce that HTML script into the body of the template if you like. And then we can choose that we're going to attach a statement to that email. And we say we want to include a statement. We're going to use send the statement as of the last month end date, and we can choose the start date for the transactions. And in this case, we're only going to show any open outstanding transactions on the statement. We could use a consolidated statement, and what the consolidated statement refers to using a parent-child relationship within your customer accounts. And we also can choose to send the statements in the language of the locale of the customer. We can save that, and then based on the schedule that we set up, the statements will be sent. The final way we're going to look at to send statements to your customer is by using our own awesome, it's an optional module, it's something we've developed ourselves, and it's the awesome statement generation. And what we can do within that is it's a slightly more flexible way of sending your statements. And if we go to transactions, customers, and we go to customer statement runs, and we go to new customer statement run. And what our system allows us to do is to generate statements a bit like the previous one, in that we can put in what our first statement date is. So I can say 01/06 2020, the date of the first transaction. So I'll say 01/01 2019. And again, if you're using customer categories, we can choose to just produce the statements for a particular customer category. Or again, as we spoke about before, and in this case, what we're going to do is to send it to a particular list of customers using a save search. So the save search that I'm going to use is called Awesome Debtor Statement. And I'm using this save search to determine what customers are going to receive the statements. And like the previous save search, we looked like I just took a standard save search, and what I've done is I've just edited that save search and added specific criteria. I only want to send statements to customers with a balance over 10,000 euros. So I've added a criteria to say balance is greater than 10,000, and it knows then just to pick those customers. So from within the customer statement run, I'm going to choose the awesome debtor statements. Save search. And I'm going to say save. And that will populate the list below with that should populate the list below with the relevant customer list. If I go into the customers here, we have a few controls on the customer to help us achieve that. So if I go into any customer here and I go to the custom record, we've got some fields here that we've introduced, and the first field here is to disable customer statements. So that means that you can exclude a customer from ever getting a customer statement through the process, and then you choose whether you want to email the statement or you want to post the statement, or you can choose that you want to do both. So from within our statement run, it will send the statement or email the statement or post the statement. If we go to, we can choose to send the statement to a particular email address, or if you leave this blank, then it'll take the main email address on the account. And within this customer statements, then too, you can enter multiple statements, multiple email addresses using the semicolon as a separator, and then that will allow you to send the statements to multiple email addresses. If we look at the communications tab, we can see that when we generate statements from within our routine, what will happen is it will populate the communications messages with the statements that you have sent. And it will also keep a history of the date as to when you send them. So if there's any confusion with the customer as to whether you've sent a statement or not, you'll be fit to see a record of when you last sent a statement to that customer. Also within the custom tab, it'll keep the last statement date sent, the last statement date also. So if I go back to the routine, we can see here it's telling us that the status is pending, so we're ready to send these statements. It's giving us a list of who we're going to send them to and how they're going to be distributed. So whether it's going to be by email or by post. So if I now, what we also have the option to do within this is to edit each individual one and exclude them from it if we want to. So when we get the list, we can still at that stage exclude them from actually sending the statements. When I'm ready, I can say process. I say OK, and then the routine is going to go off now, and it's going to either email off the statement to the customer, or it's going to generate a file of PDF document with all the ones that we want to post out to the customers. So if I refresh this now, we can see that it's already processed and it's telling us it's processed. If I go to files here, we can see this is the PDF document containing the statements that we're going to post out. So we can download that, print it out, and post them out to the customers. The next area I want to look at is using saved searches to chase overdue invoices. So if I come back to my system here, and the scenario we're going to use is that we're going to chase over invoices that are 30 days overdue, and we're going to send a letter out to the customer just to remind them that the invoices, which invoices are 30 days overdue. And we're also going to then follow that up with a second email for invoices that are 35 days overdue. So if we look at, we're going to use Save Search, as I said, to produce that information. The first Save Search that I've created is called Email Reminders 1. Email Reminder 1 even, and we'll choose that and we'll take a look at that Save Search. So that Save Search will provide these results here, and we can see that this is a list of invoices that are more than 30 days overdue. So we can see what the due date is on the invoice. If I edit the Save Search and we look at the information on that Save Search, firstly we'll take a look at the results, and that was the information that we've seen on the list view. So the name, the date, the type, the document number, the amount of the transaction, and the due date of the transaction. We've also got a field here. I've created a custom field and I put that on the invoice, and that's a field, a tick box, just to say that the customer, whether the customer has promised to pay the invoice or not, and we'll take a look at that in a second. If I go to criteria, this is the criteria we're using to filter the information that we want to see within our Save Search. So the type of transaction is an invoice. The status is that the invoice is open. The due date or the received by date is anything that is on or before 30 days, so anything that's 30 days overdue. And we only want to see invoices where the customer hasn't promised to pay those invoices. If I go to the email tab, we can see here this is specific recipients. You can specify specific people you want to receive this. So this may be an individual, these emails. So this may be an individual within your organization that you want to receive the emails. So it could be the financial controller or the CFO or some other user. We specify here that we want to we're going to send these emails on a scheduled basis, and we're going to summarize the scheduled email. So we're going to summarize the information that is sent. So if we left that unticked, it would send an email for every invoice on the list. So if one customer has multiple invoices outstanding, it would send multiple emails to the customer, which would be quite annoying. So we would, we're going to tick that box to say we're going to summarize it. So they'll get a single invoice for all the invoices that are outstanding. Results from recipients from the results, we're going to choose that we're going to email these emails to the main email address on the customer account. Again, you could create custom email fields for email addresses and choose to send them to those. We're going to look at customized message, and this is the details that are going to appear on the email. We can choose who the email is coming from, the subject, and the body of the email. So we can choose the message that we want to put on this email. If we go to the schedule, this is the schedule we're going to send these emails on. So we're going to send it weekly. We're going to repeat it every week on a Tuesday, the start date, and there's no end date. And this is the date that this is the time that we're going to send them on every Tuesday. So when you save that, every 30 days or every week, it'll send out the results of that Save Search. Now, what you could do is follow that up with a second email for when the invoices are 35 days overdue and the customer is yet to promise to pay those invoices. So if I go in to a second Save Search for 35 days, and the information on that Save Search or the results of that Save Search will change because the due date may not, you'll have maybe less information on this. If I go into edit, so we'll look at this one, Yakul Holdings. If I go into and edit that transaction, and maybe in the meantime, between 30 days and 35 days, the customer has come back to you and said, yes, we promised to pay that invoice. So what we can do is go into the invoice and we can go to the promise to pay field and tick it to say, yes, the customer has promised to pay, and that invoice shouldn't appear on the results of this save search. So if I choose to update that, that invoice should disappear from the list. So so that has excluded it, so that the customer won't get an email reminder about that invoice. So if I look at this save search, it's quite similar to the previous one. The difference being that the results are slightly different, as the criteria is 35 days overdue. If I go to email here and I go to the custom messaging and we look at this custom messaging, we can see maybe that we have chose to change the messaging on this to be please pay or your account will go on hold, or you can customize the messaging depending on the severity of the email you want to send. There are some small limitations in relation to save searches and using save searches to send emails, in that the characters, you have a limit to the amount of characters that you can include on an email. Formatting of the email is not as flexible in that on the workflow you can use HTML scripting. Within save searches, you cannot use the HTML scripting. Emails sent from a save search are not attached to a customer's communications, and each save search that you include, so the 30-day one, in my case, the 30-day one and the 35-day save search, they're not interlinked, so one isn't dependent on the results of another or what has happened as a result of the other. So there are a little more manual than if you're using workflows where you can choose to interlink various actions. So that's the end of my presentation now. I'll hand you back to Sinead. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. I'm just going to share my screen now, just 1 second. And I'm going to go into... Okay, so we're going to now look at, Brian has already introduced the concept of workflow. So I'm just going to do a little bit more on that. So this is an example of an invoice collection workflow. So again, this is all about using workflow to kind of map to your existing processes or to come up with a way of automating your collection processes. It can be as simple or as complex as you need it to be. So this is a really powerful tool, and it usually kicks off with some kind of trigger. So in this case, we have an invoice that is 30 days overdue. And based on that, the workflow then will kick in. So an email would be sent out to these customers to inform them that their invoice is 30 days overdue. We also can build in different scenarios. So let's just say the amount is greater than 10K. So we can build that in as a sort of a criteria. If the amount is greater than 10,000, well, then you need to do the following. So in this case, we're going to send out a reminder email. And we can also build in other actions like phone calls or tasks. So you could have a phone call scheduled automatically for one of your sales reps or one of your AOR team. You could also have an email sent to your dunning director. So again, all of these things can be just built into your workflow. And in the last step here, we've got placing the customer on credit hold. Again, trying to automate as much of this process as possible. So I'll just take one of these as an example. So I'm going to go into the phone call just to show you the different setups in here. So let's just go in here. So this is where we set up this state, which is called create phone call. We'll just scroll on down just to some of the fields. So these are the fields that get populated on that task that is going to now be assigned to somebody. So first of all, the title is going to be follow up on overdue invoice. And we can see here the transaction ID will also be incorporated. So when that person is assigned that task, they'll know which invoice they need to chase up on. We can see the customer. We can see who it's been assigned to. So in this case, we've assigned this phone call to the sales rep. And we can see the start date is 5 days from now. And the organizer is the sales rep and the phone number. So the sales rep basically gets this phone call popping up to say, you need to phone this customer, you need to chase up on this invoice, and they have the phone number there in front of them to make the call. They'll also have access to the transaction, so they can actually pull up that invoice and talk through whatever it is that they're chasing up on. So that's pretty much all I wanted to show you on workflows, just to keep it short and sweet. I'm just going to go back into my PowerPoint momentarily, just to I suppose to recap, we've explored the concept of save searches for chasing, and Brian has already gone through that process. But I just want to kind of recap on the limitations. So if you go and choose to use save searches for chasing, there are limitations around the number of characters you can use on the email. The formatting of the emails, again, is not hugely flexible. The email itself doesn't get attached to the customer communication, so that might be a limitation for you. And the other thing is, save searches just operate independently, so there's no interaction between different save searches. On the other hand, if we use workflow, it's generally used for kind of automating scenarios, and for more automated scenarios, I should say. You can also, we've seen where we can incorporate tasks. So we've incorporated a phone call into the workflow. It's based on triggers usually as well. So something triggers it to happen. We can also build in those scenarios. So if something else, then it goes off in a different direction in the workflow. And finally, you can attach additional documents to emails in the workflow as well. And the communication also gets attached to the customer record. The next thing we're going to look at is the really nice module that's available called the Dunning Cloud Service module. So this sits alongside all of the standard financial modules within NetSuite. But the real benefit of having this module is that it takes away a lot of the groundwork that you would have to do to kind of start from scratch with your kind of AOR and Dunning and chasing. So it's doing a lot of the hard work for you. It includes, there's a lot of flexibility in here as well in terms of how you want to set it up and what way you want to operate your Dunning. So I'll just run down through just some of the key points here. I suppose the Dunning Director role, which we'll see in a few minutes, includes some debt-related business metrics already in there. You can choose also to Dun specific invoices rather than the whole customer account if that's what you wish to do. You can also decide on different Dunning levels based on criteria such as the age of the debt, the minimum invoice amount, the total overdue balance, or you can do combinations with multi-currency in there as well. And the last thing you can do as well is to put particular customers, remove them from the Dunning cycle. So if there's a query or if there's some kind of customer service issue that you need to resolve, well, then you can just remove them so they're not going to be annoyed with you chasing them. Okay, so let's just go back into the demo, and I'm going to pull up that Dunning Director role. My mouse decides to work. Bear with me. Okay, so I'm just going to choose a different role now. I have a Dunning Director role, which I'm going to click on. Okay, so this is just a typical example of a role within NetSuite. So it is obviously role-based. I'm choosing the role of Dunning Director. So everything I'm looking at here relates to me in my role. So what do I need to do today? Well, I have some reminders up in the top left-hand corner. So I have 224 invoices that are overdue. Oh, okay, that's not so good. You can click on that little hyperlink and up comes your list of invoices, and you can action those or do whatever you need to do there. We can also have reminders on various different tasks that I need to carry out. So if I scroll on down, just I'm not going to go through everything, but just to give you kind of the idea, we have a KPI meter over here on the left-hand side. So I'm looking at total AOR overdue. I may also decide to look at different, from different perspectives, dunning overdue receivables or invoices 30 days plus overdue. If we look across here now, we're looking at, Brian has already introduced this sort of concept of saved searches. So this is pretty much a saved search. So it's basically pulling customers by outstanding balance onto a little list. Now, again, you have full flexibility and control over, what you want to see, how many records you want to display on your screen, even highlighting. So in this particular example, we put in some highlighting. So anything over a balance of 500,000, we'll then highlight it and put a little flag against it. Really nice and quite visual as well. So, if you're in this role, you want to stay on top of your debtors, and this is a really nice way to do that. Key performance indicators over on the left-hand side. Again, we've got some obviously relevant KPIs. So dunning overdue receivables by customer, dunning overdue receivables this month, last month, etc. And if I go down to the next section here, recently sent printed dunning letters. So these are all of the letters that would have been sent out recently. And I'm going to open up an option in a second. I'm going to go into one of those in a second. But just the last little portlet I have on my dashboard is overdue invoices 90 days plus, and again we've applied some nice highlighting onto that one as well. So I'm just going to choose this customer here, Ultimate Technology. Now again, if you're familiar with NetSuite, you can just click on the hyperlink, and anywhere you have a hyperlink you can literally click into it and get the underlying data, or you can right click on it and open it up in a new tab, and that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go into, this is the customer record, and you can see if I scroll on down here, so again, just normal kind of customer settings above. If I go into the communications tab, I'm going to just scroll on down here for 1 second. So these are all of the automated notices or emails that would have been sent out and would have been triggered as part of a workflow. So you can see here your invoice 0762 is 30 days overdue, and so on and so forth. So if you look at this one here, this is a third notice that has been sent out actually to Chris Nelson as the primary recipient and Ultimate Technology. So it may have been actually sent to an individual within your organization, as well as sending it out directly to the customer. You can also see that we have an attachment. So when the third notice is issued to the customer, there would also be, in this case, the statement attached. So I can click on that and up comes your PDF of your customer statement. Okay, so that's the first thing, looking at the messages or emails. If I go into the activities, you'll also see here that we have scheduled some calls. And again, we saw this in the workflow where we can select a particular invoice. Let's just pick this one here. I should say task, not invoice. So we select the task and we can see here it's a follow-up on overdue invoice 0764. So again, the sales rep who's been assigned this task can see exactly what they need to do. They need to phone this customer. Here's the phone number. And you can actually, if you go into related records, you'll actually see the link to that specific transaction. So they can click on that, or they can open it up in a new tab and have access to the full detail that they need at that point. Now, again, we mentioned earlier that sales rep, when they log in their role, they could have a pop-up or a reminder sitting there, or their calendar sitting on their dashboard to show that they need to phone this customer on this particular date and time. Okay, so that's that. And then the last thing I want to just mention is, because we have the dunning module installed in this demonstration, we have a dunning tab. So if I click on the dunning tab and if I click on setup, I can have, there's a few little settings in here that you may want to switch on or off. Examples might be, do you want letters to be emailed, or do you want them to be printed? Do you want to attach, or which dunning procedure do you want to attach to this customer record? And I'll go into dunning procedures in just a moment. And lastly, maybe you want to pause the dunning. So for any particular reason, you can go in here and just check that little box, and this customer then will be excluded from your dunning cycle. So I'm going to go into the setup of the dunning module, and I'm going to pick up on the dunning procedure. And we've got one already set up called standard dunning. So it's basically in here that you can decide whether you want to apply the dunning to the customer or to specific invoices. You can decide again on your schedule, is it something that's going to be carried out manually or is it something you want to automate? Who's the dunning manager? And you've got various different settings in relation to subsidiaries and all of that. Just going to scroll on down to this checkbox here. So this is really handy. It's a checkbox that says, look, if we create a new record, that this particular procedure will automatically be assigned to new records. So once you create a new customer, that this procedure will automatically attach. So if we look down at the bottom here, we have the different dunning levels. So, and again, within the setup, you can determine how those levels are set up. So in this case, we can see we've level 1, 2, and 3, and we have just defined 30 days and over $1,000 with a minimum invoice amount of 100 and a total overdue balance of 500. And you can actually attach then a template to that level. So obviously the tone of that email gets a bit more severe as you start to reach the 90 days. So it's up to you how you want to word those templates. But once those templates are created, you simply just attach them to the different levels. You can also decide here whether you want the minimum invoice amount and the total overdue balance to be taken into account, or whether it's an either or an and scenario there. So you have full control over that. So that's pretty much it on that front. I'm just going to log off then out of this role, and I'm going to pick up on my role of AOR assistant. So this is just to show and to demonstrate another example of a nicely presented dashboard for the AOR executive or AOR assistant. So I've got my calendar over here on the left-hand side, so I know I need to phone this customer regarding an overdue balance. I have some tiles here as well, which are nice visual settings or options that you can click on. So if I, for example, choose the AOR aging, I can click into it, and it will bring me up a full list of my AOR summary. And again, as always within NetSuite, you have the option to drill down into the detail behind that summary, and you can literally drill all the way back to kind of underlying data. Over on the right hand side, we have a nice little trend graph here. So monthly receivables trend, we can choose monthly, we can choose daily, just to keep a close eye on things. You might want to look at it over the quarter, and you can choose different styles of graph as well. We also have, we've seen reminders earlier on, and we can choose again which reminders we want to highlight. You can see here, these ones are kind of highlighted. So 26 invoices overdue and 7 sales orders to invoice. In the middle section, we have a nice KPI indicator. So we're looking here at some kind of, some standard KPIs. We can also build in custom KPIs. So, and at the top level, we can see the trends basically. So receivables are up, average days to receive are down, our day sales outstanding up or down, etc. So that's really nice. And what's as always with any of the dashboard data that you have presented in front of you, wherever you have your hyperlink, you can click into it. So if you want to go into the receivables, you can just click on that little on the hyperlink there, or open in a new tab as we've already demonstrated. And along with that, a KPI, you also can set a KPI meter and pop that onto your dashboard. So you can see here we have average days outstanding, we have our receivables, we have our average day sales outstanding, which kind of mirrors more or less what you have here in your KPI above. So yeah, I mean, you can just put whatever saved searches, reports, snapshots. Looking down here, we have forecasted cash receipts, again broken out over the different weeks. You can see what money is expected in for the different time periods. So that's a little whistle-stop tour of debtor management within NetSuite. So I'll just wrap up. I'll just head back over to my PowerPoint just to say Thank you very much for watching. And if there's anything you'd like to follow up with us on, you can always get us on sales@awesomecloud.ie, or our website address is awesomecloud.ie. So thank you very much for your time, and we will close it there. Thank you.